A 10-year-old boy, completely drenched and visibly terrified, burst into the restaurant owned by the Mafia boss. "They took my sister," he wailed. "Please, only a king can save her." Unbeknownst to the boy, his sister had uncovered a secret that was never meant to be found, and the king, in his world, held a strict code. He never disregarded a child who called him by his true title. Lorenzo Vitali harbored a particular distaste for interruptions during his supper. The private dining suite at Bellinati, his esteemed restaurant on the north side of Chicago, was considered sacrosanct ground. No cell phones, no underlings barging in with crises, just him, a glass of Barolo, and the precious silence he paid handsomely to preserve. So, when the main doors violently flew open at precisely 9:47 p.m., his hand instinctively gravitated toward the Beretta concealed beneath his jacket. "Boss!" Marco, his chief of security, stumbled into view, frantically trying to catch a small, rapid figure. "Boss, I am terribly sorry." A child had shot past Marco like a bolt of lightning, no more than 10 or 11 years old, utterly soaked by the October rain, his sneakers squeaking rhythmically on the polished marble floor. In his grasp, he clutched a battered spiral notebook as if it were his very lifeline. The boy didn't pause at the security checkpoint, nor did he slow his pace when 3 of Lorenzo's men blocked his path. With astonishing agility, he ducked beneath their arms and sprinted directly toward Lorenzo's table, his breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. "Please?" The word exploded from him. "Please, you must help me!" Lorenzo's men immediately converged, their hands reaching for the boy, but Lorenzo merely raised a single finger, and they froze mid-stride. The child collapsed to his knees in front of Lorenzo's table, rain dripping from his dark hair onto the expensive Persian rug. His brown eyes were wide with a mix of panic and tears. "Please, mister." "Vitali, please save my sister." His voice cracked as he continued. "They took her. She said, 'Only a king can defeat thieves.' You're the king, aren't you?" Lorenzo deliberately set down his wineglass with painstaking slowness. In 3 decades of orchestrating Chicago's most intricate criminal enterprise, he had witnessed a plethora of pleas, people begging for clemency, for defense, for vengeance. Yet, a child was an entirely novel phenomenon. "How do you know my name?" Lorenzo's voice was calm, almost soothing. "Everyone knows," the boy said, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "My sister told me. She said if anything ever happened, if we ever needed real help, I should seek out the King of Chicago. That's you. Your sister is astute." Lorenzo reclined in his chair, scrutinizing the boy. "What is your name?" Danny Chun, and your sister?" "Elena Chun. She's 16. They abducted her 3 hours ago." Danny's hands trembled as he held up the notebook. "She left this. I believe it's important. I think that's why they took her." Lorenzo gestured for the notebook. Danny practically hurled it at him, desperation emanating from every fiber of his being. The pages were densely covered with numbers, not random digits. Lorenzo recognized encryption patterns, algorithmic sequences, and code strings that bore an almost musical resemblance. In the margins, someone had meticulously scribbled notes in tiny, precise handwriting. A256 variant, possible backdoor, wallet signature matches cartel pattern. Lorenzo's pulse quickened, though his expression remained perfectly composed. He had encountered this type of work before. His own cyber team employed similar methodologies to trace offshore accounts and money laundering operations. "Where did your sister obtain this?" He kept his tone casually neutral, but Marco, sensing the subtle shift in his boss's demeanor, moved closer. "She's incredibly gifted with math and computers. Like, genius-level smart," Danny's words now tumbled out faster. "She participates in these online puzzle competitions, code-breaking contests. Last week she discovered this strange string of numbers on some forum. She thought it was just another puzzle, but when she started solving it, she cracked something she wasn't supposed to." Lorenzo finished. Danny nodded frantically. "These men came to our apartment tonight. They had firearms. They stated Elena knew too much, that she had located their vault or something. They said she had to complete the task, or they'd—" His voice completely broke. "They said they'd make sure she never solved another puzzle again." Lorenzo continued to flip through more pages. The advanced mathematics were beyond his comprehension, but he instinctively recognized immense value. This was not merely a child's homework. This was the critical key to someone's immense fortune and their very security. Did you observe these men clearly? Any names? One of them had a tattoo, a snake coiled around a cross. On his neck, Danny traced the pattern in the air. And they were speaking Spanish sometimes. The main boss, he made a phone call, said something like, "We have her, and Mendoza wants it finished by dawn." Lorenzo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mendoza. Diego Mendoza ran the Southside cartel operations. Lorenzo's primary adversary for the past 5 years. They shared an unspoken agreement, remain out of each other's territory and maintain the peace. Thus, Chicago remained lucrative for everyone. But if Mendoza was now abducting teenage hackers, "Boss," Marco leaned down, his voice low. "The Mendoza family has been transferring crypto for months, significant amounts. If this girl can access their vault..." "I understand its implications." Lorenzo rose, all 6 feet of calculated power. He looked down at Danny, who gazed up at him with the desperate hope of someone who had staked everything on an impossible gamble. Every instinct urged Lorenzo to send the boy home. This was not his concern. Getting involved meant war with Mendoza, meant unnecessary complications. But then he looked at the notebook again, at the brilliant, precise handwriting of a 16-year-old girl who had inadvertently stumbled into the heart of a cartel's fortune. A girl who could decipher codes that professional hackers couldn't touch. A girl who, if Mendoza had his way, would either vanish forever or be weaponized against Lorenzo himself. "Marco," Lorenzo said quietly, "assemble the team. All of them. We are retrieving this girl." Lorenzo handed the notebook to Marco, then looked down at Danny. "You did the correct thing by coming here, kid, but I need you to recount everything, every single detail about tonight's events. Can you do that?" Danny nodded so vigorously his entire body trembled. "Yes. Yes, sir. Anything. Just please save Elena. She's all I have." Lorenzo placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, a rare gesture of reassurance. "Then let's go find your sister. Because if there's one thing I despise more than people interrupting my dinner..." He glanced toward the rain-streaked windows where the Chicago night waited, its thieves seizing what was not rightfully theirs. Lorenzo led Danny to a private office on the 2nd floor, away from prying eyes. Marco followed, along with Vincent Chen-No, relation to the boy, but Lorenzo's most skilled tech analyst. If anyone could unravel the contents of that notebook, it was Vincent. Danny sank into a leather chair that almost swallowed him whole, still clutching his wet jacket. Someone brought him hot chocolate, but it remained untouched on the desk. "Start from the beginning," Lorenzo commanded, settling across from him. "Tell me about Elena." Danny's eyes welled up again, but he blinked back the tears. "She's not like other kids. When she was 7, she was doing calculus. By 10, she was teaching herself programming languages. Our parents," his voice caught, "they died in a car accident 2 years ago. Elena has been taking care of us ever since." "How?" Lorenzo inquired. "A 16-year-old cannot work full-time. She does freelance coding, website development, data analysis, and she enters these online competitions, cryptography challenges, puzzle tournaments. Sometimes there's prize money." Danny's hands twisted together. "But mostly she just loves solving things. She says numbers make sense when nothing else does." Vincent leaned forward, the notebook open in his hands. "These algorithms, Danny, your sister taught herself this? She learns from YouTube, online courses, forums. She's always on her computer." Danny looked at Vincent desperately. "Is what she found bad?" Vincent exchanged a brief glance with Lorenzo. "It's remarkable, and yes, very bad for her." "Tell him," Lorenzo instructed. "He deserves to know what his sister walked into." Vincent pointed to a sequence on one of the pages. "Your sister discovered what we call a cryptocurrency wallet address. Think of it like a bank account number, but for digital currency. These particular patterns align with a known cartel operation. Based on her notes, she traced the encryption safeguarding the wallet and began to dismantle it layer by layer." "She thought it was just a puzzle," Danny whispered. "There's this forum she frequents, Cryptic Minds it's called. People post challenges. She said someone posted this strange number string and challenged people to decode it. She didn't realize it was real. Someone posted cartel financial information as a public puzzle?" Marco's eyebrows shot up. "That's a trap. Lorenzo stated coldly. Or an inside job. Someone wanted that wallet cracked and surmised the most effective way to achieve it was to crowdsource it to hackers who were unaware of what they were truly examining. Vincent nodded, but Elena was the only one who got close. See these notations? She identified the encryption type, pinpointed a backdoor vulnerability, and was perhaps 70% through cracking the access codes. If she had finished, Lorenzo concluded, she could empty the vault. How much money? Danny asked in a small voice. Lorenzo looked at Vincent, who meticulously studied the calculations. Based on these transaction patterns, somewhere between $500 million and $700 million. The staggering sum hung in the air like a looming threat. Danny's face turned ashen. That's why they took her. They want her to finish it. Not just finish it, Lorenzo corrected. They want her to drain it before anyone else can. Mendoza's vault, the one your sister located, is where he stores funds from drug operations, weapons sales, everything. If someone empties it, his entire empire collapses overnight. But Elena won't help them. She won't. Danny's voice rose with panic. She told me, when they broke in, she screamed that she would never help criminals. They hit her and dragged her out anyway. Lorenzo's expression darkened. Violence against women, especially children, violated even his stringent code. What time did they take her? 6:45? At a friend's house, absorbed in homework, I answered a distressed call from Elena. Her voice, choked with tears, urged me to find you before the line abruptly disconnected. Danny, retrieving a damaged iPhone, frantically attempted to redial 100 times, but to no avail. Marco's glance at his watch confirmed 3 hours had elapsed. If Mendoza's deadline was dawn, approximately 6 hours remained to coerce her cooperation. She'll never cooperate, Danny repeated, his voice laced with desperation. She's incredibly stubborn. She'll resist them fiercely. That's precisely my fear, Lorenzo murmured somberly. Vincent meticulously closed his notebook. Boss, if our interpretation is correct, Elena isn't merely intelligent. She's a prodigy. The mathematical concepts here are PhD level. She's uncovered encryption vulnerabilities that would elude most professional hackers. The unspoken implication hung heavy. If Mendoza grasped her true value beyond just this singular vault, he wouldn't simply release someone with Elena's skill set. Once the vault was compromised, she faced an inevitable fate, perpetual imprisonment or a premature death. Lorenzo rose, gravitating towards the window. Rain lashed against the pane, blurring Chicago's city lights into indistinct watercolor streaks. For years, he had meticulously maintained a delicate equilibrium, a tenuous peace between rival factions that prevented the city from descending into violent chaos. Rescuing this girl would shatter that fragile truce. Yet, abandoning her to Mendoza's mercy, if he possessed any, meant condemning a 16-year-old genius to die for the sheer brilliance of her mind. Danny, Lorenzo turned, his gaze piercing. Did your sister create backups of her work? Cloud storage, encrypted drives, anything? Danny nodded vigorously. Always. She's meticulously paranoid about data loss. Why? Lorenzo pressed. Because if Mendoza extracts what he wants from Elena, he'll obliterate every trace of her work, and likely her too. But if we have copies, Marco interjected, completing the thought, we have leverage. We could even finish what she started ourselves, Danny added, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Lorenzo revisited the notebook, examining the frantic scribblings of a teenage girl grappling with an impossible enigma. She had likely saved Danny's life by urging him to flee. For 3 grueling hours, she had probably been fending off Mendoza's enforcers, stalling, fighting, refusing to yield. Such courage was a rarity, even among adults. Vincent, meticulously analyze everything in this notebook. I need to know precisely what Elena uncovered and how close she was to completion. Lorenzo's voice hardened, adopting the chilling authority that established him as Chicago's most formidable boss. Marco, assemble the team. Full tactical gear. I want every Mendoza property under surveillance by midnight. We're going to war. War? Marco questioned, his voice tight. No. Lorenzo's smile was thin, almost predatory. We're going to expropriate something precious from a thief. And then, we're going to have a very serious discussion about respect. Danny looked up. a glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. "You'll save her? Really?" Lorenzo met the boy's gaze. "Kid, your sister cracked a $700 million vault in her spare time. She's far more valuable than gold." He rested a hand on Danny's shoulder. "And in my world, you protect your investments." He left unsaid his personal curiosity about meeting the girl who, purely by accident, had outmaneuvered Chicago's criminal underworld with only a laptop and an unyielding, brilliant stubbornness. If she survived the night, she would undoubtedly be the most intriguing person he had encountered in years. Lorenzo's war room rapidly filled. Within 20 minutes, his top 5 lieutenants were seated around the polished mahogany table, the notebook resting at its center like a loaded weapon. Danny had been escorted to a guest room, guarded by one of Lorenzo's most trusted men. The boy required rest, but more critically, the impending discussion was not for civilian ears, even those of the civilian who had brought them this predicament. Marco stood by the door, arms crossed. Vincent's laptop was open, the notebook's contents already digitized and uploaded. The others, Tony Filoni, Rita Duca, James Park, and the venerable Sal Benedetti, studied the information with a mixture of interest and alarm. "Mendoza," Tony finally broke the silence. Lorenzo's enforcer, built like a brick wall with fists to match, was formidable. "Are we truly contemplating confronting Mendoza's operations?" "Not his operation," Vincent corrected. "His prisoner, who possesses information about his operation." "Same difference." Tony leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "We have an understanding with the South Side. A peace." "Yeah, but a peace," Marco conceded. "Do you comprehend this girl's value to him?" Rita questioned pointedly. "Everything. If we take her, it's an outright declaration of war." Rita Duca, Lorenzo's consigliere, and the sharpest legal mind present, tapped her manicured red nails on the table. "Let's clarify what we're discussing. A 16-year-old American citizen was abducted from her home by a criminal enterprise. Legally and morally, assisting her is the righteous course of action. Since when do we prioritize legal and moral considerations?" Tony snorted. "Since it offers us plausible deniability if this goes awry," Rita retorted. "Public sentiment matters. Teenage genius kidnapped by drug cartel. That narrative resonates powerfully if authorities become involved." "If authorities become involved, we're all compromised," Sal Benedetti rasped. At 73, he was the oldest man at the table, having survived more gang wars than all the others combined. "This isn't about right or wrong, it's about territory and respect. Mendoza kidnaps someone. We rescue her. That makes him appear weak. Weakness leads his own people to question him. Questioning leads to chaos. Chaos leads to opportunity." James Park interjected, Lorenzo's financial strategist adjusting his glasses, eyes gleaming. "Sal's correct, but he's not seeing the complete picture. Mendoza's vault holds over $500 million. If this girl can crack it, and we possess her—" "We are not thieves," Marco stated sharply. "No, we're businessmen," James countered. "And this represents the business opportunity of a lifetime. Consider this. Mendoza has been encroaching on our territories for 2 years. The docks, the gambling operations, even attempting to muscle into our protection contracts. He's been probing, testing our boundaries. This is leverage we've never previously held." Tony shook his head. "It's also a gun pointed at our heads. Do you truly believe he'll simply permit us to walk away with the one person capable of financially ruining him?" "He won't know we possess her," Vincent said softly. Everyone turned to look at him. "Not immediately. We extract Elena tonight. We keep her hidden. Let Mendoza believe she escaped or died, or that a rival crew seized her. By the time he ascertains our involvement, we've already emptied his vault and disappeared the money," James finished, a wide smile spreading across his face. "We could cripple him without firing a single bullet. Or," Rita interjected, "we could utilize her as a bargaining chip, return her to Mendoza in exchange for territorial concessions, a peace treaty with genuine substance." "Give her back?" Marco's voice rose. "She came to us for help. The kid walked through our doors seeking protection. We hand her over to the man who kidnapped her? We're no better than—" "We're criminals, Marco," Sal interrupted. "Let's not delude ourselves. The girl has no family except a 10-year-old brother. No parents, no protection. She is alone in a world she doesn't comprehend. Whether we save her or trade her, she remains a pawn. That is the grim reality. She's a person, Marco snapped. She's an asset, Tony corrected. And assets possess value. The question is, what do we value more? Peace with Mendoza or the potential payout from that vault? The room erupted into tumultuous argument. Voices overlapped, hands slammed down on tables. Rita advocated for negotiation. James pushed vigorously for the financial gain. Tony insisted on preserving the existing status quo. Sal persistently emphasized the perils of disrupting territorial balance. Marco stood alone, passionately arguing for their moral obligation to help Elena. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, observing their heated debate, each tearing apart the other's arguments. He had remained silent since convening the meeting, having no need to speak. His people were astute, passionate, and had articulated every conceivable angle he had already considered, but they were overlooking a critical element. "Enough," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. The room instantly fell silent. Lorenzo stood, slowly circumnavigating the table. "You're all posing the wrong question. This isn't about Mendoza. It's not about money or territory or peace treaties." He picked up the notebook, feeling its surprising weight. "This is about a 16-year-old girl who is smarter than anyone in this room, smarter than Mendoza, probably smarter than me." He met each of their gazes in turn. She inadvertently deciphered a code that professional hackers couldn't even touch in her spare time for amusement. "Boss," Tony started, "allow me to finish." Lorenzo's voice hardened. Right now, Mendoza has her held in some warehouse, probably threatening her, perhaps harming her, attempting to force her to compromise his vault. When she accomplishes it, and she will because she is that brilliant, what do you anticipate will happen? He thanks her and releases her? The silence that followed provided their answer. She becomes a liability the very instant that vault opens. She possesses too much knowledge, too much capability. Best case scenario, he keeps her imprisoned indefinitely. Worst case, she vanishes into Lake Michigan. Lorenzo set the notebook down with deliberate care. Now, we could simply walk away, maintain our peace, avoid the complications, allow a teenage girl to perish because it's politically expedient. He looked at each of them again, his gaze cold and penetrating. Or we could remember that a girl who can crack $700 million in encryption is worth infinitely more than any temporary peace treaty with Diego Mendoza. His voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. A girl like that, loyal to us, protected by us. That's not merely an asset, that's a weapon, that is the future. Lorenzo placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. We are retrieving her, not for the money, not for leverage. Because Elena Chun embodies the kind of genius that emerges once in a generation, and I am not foolish enough to allow Mendoza to squander her. His eyes glinted dangerously. Besides, I'm genuinely curious to meet the girl who accidentally declared war on Chicago's cartels with nothing but a laptop. A long moment of silence pervaded the room. Finally, Sal chuckled, a dry, rasping sound of amusement. Yearning to expand his collection of intriguing individuals, Lorenzo, with unwavering resolve, straightened up. I aim to prevail, S, and this young woman, she's our pathway to victory. Marco's shoulders visibly relaxed. So, tonight we move? Tonight we move, Lorenzo confirmed. Prepare a tactical strike. I demand detailed surveillance, comprehensive extraction strategies, and multiple backup scenarios. Mendoza dared to seize something precious from someone under my protection. It's time to reveal the gravity of his miscalculation. No one voiced an objection. The decision was final. The king had decreed. In Lorenzo's exclusive tech sanctuary, Vincent Chin meticulously arranged notebook pages across 3 computer screens. The space, with its humming servers, multiple glowing displays, and equipment worth more than opulent homes, resembled a cutting-edge Silicon Valley startup more than a Mafia command center. Lorenzo observed patiently from behind him, while Marco restlessly paced near the doorway. It was well past midnight, and each passing moment heightened the dread that Elena remained in Mendoza's clutches. All right, Vincent murmured, his fingers a blur across the keyboard. All right, this is unprecedented. This girl is truly extraordinary. Elaborate, Lorenzo commanded. Vincent brought up a digital rendering of one particular page. Observe these sequences. Elena was employing differential cryptanalysis, a technique so advanced it mirrored NSA-level sophistication. She was systematically dismantling the encryption layer by layer, meticulously searching for inherent patterns and vulnerabilities. In layman's terms, Vincent, Lorenzo interjected, she's picking a lock by understanding the intricate mechanics of each tumbler on the inside, rather than merely attempting every conceivable key. Vincent scrolled through additional pages. Most hackers would resort to brute force, trying billions of password combinations until one works. That process can span months, even years. Elena, however, discovered a shortcut directly through the underlying mathematics. Marco ceased his pacing. Based on her current progress, how long would it take her to complete it? Vincent calculated swiftly. 4 to 6 hours of concentrated effort, perhaps less if she performs as brilliantly under pressure as she does in a relaxed setting. Lorenzo glanced at his watch. She's been with Mendoza for 5 hours. Time is running out. Vincent magnified a section of 1 page. But here's the truly fascinating part. Do you see this? Scrawled in minuscule handwriting, almost concealed within the margin, was a string of numbers. 1-1921-687743. An IP address, Vincent declared. A local network address. She traced the origin of the original puzzle post. She tracked Mendoza's location. Marco leaned in closer. Not Mendoza himself, but rather the individual who posted that challenge to the cryptography forum. Elena wasn't merely solving the puzzle, she was investigating it. Vincent's fingers danced across the keyboard. Clever girl. She must have sensed something amiss about the challenge. Genuine cryptography enthusiasts don't typically post 700 million vault codes just for amusement. He activated mapping software, inputting the IP address into a tracing program. Lines of code scrolled down the screen, bouncing the signal through various network nodes. The IP has been masked through proxy servers, but Elena left digital breadcrumbs of her tracking process. She was meticulously following the digital trail backward to pinpoint the source. And she found it. Look. Vincent's eyes widened. A map of Chicago materialized, a red pin dropping onto a location near the docks. Warehouse District, Marco stated. Southside territory, and not just any warehouse. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, rapidly scrolling through property records. 2847 South Harbor Street, registered to a shell company, Mendoza's Shell Company. We flagged it 2 years ago as a possible distribution point. Vincent cross-referenced the address with city utility records. Power consumption at that location spiked 3 days ago, far exceeding that of a typical warehouse. Someone is operating serious equipment in there. Computer equipment, Lorenzo concluded. For Elena, it makes sense. If they want her to crack the vault, they'd need to provide her with appropriate hardware. You can't attempt that level of cryptography on a smartphone. Vincent then pulled up satellite imagery of the warehouse. A single building, approximately 12,000 square feet. Loading docks on the east side. Main entrance facing north. From the exterior, it appears abandoned. He switched to infrared data from a recent satellite pass. Heat signatures, multiple sources, at least a dozen individuals inside, possibly more. And observe this pattern. He indicated a concentrated heat signature in the building's center. That's electronics, a significant amount, running hot. Marco retrieved his own tablet, making notes. Guard positions. Cannot discern from the satellite. Will require eyes on the ground. Vincent switched programs again. However, I can confirm they possess formidable security. The building's network is completely isolated. No Wi-Fi signals escaping. No cellular connections. They've established a dead zone. Whatever Elena is doing in there, they're ensuring no data leaves the premises. Lorenzo meticulously studied the warehouse location, his mind already cycling through tactical permutations. The docks were Mendoza's domain, yet sparsely populated at night, primarily shipping containers and derelict structures. A firefight there wouldn't immediately attract police attention, but it would undoubtedly summon Mendoza's reinforcements. What about surveillance cameras? He inquired. Vincent displayed traffic camera feeds from intersecting roads. City cameras cover the main arteries, but not the warehouse itself. However, he rewound footage from earlier that evening. I have something. 7:00 p.m. 3 black SUVs entered the warehouse district. They never exited. He enhanced the image. The license plates were obscured, but in one frame, a door briefly opened, revealing a figure. Freeze that, Lorenzo ordered. The image pixelated as Vincent zoomed in. A man's profile was visible for perhaps half a second. On his neck, distinctly visible even in the grainy footage, was a snake coiled around a cross. That's the tattoo Danny described, Marco breathed. Positive identification on Mendoza's crew, Vincent confirmed. They are definitely inside. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. The disparate pieces were coalescing. Elena had demonstrated brilliance not only in breaking the code, but in tracing its origin. She likely grasped the peril she was in, even before Mendoza's men arrived. Perhaps that explained her hurried scrawl of the IP address, a form of insurance, a beacon for anyone who might come looking for her. Insurance that her younger brother had inadvertently delivered directly into the hands of Chicago's most perilous figure. How many entrances to the building? Lorenzo asked. Vincent brought up architectural blueprints he had illicitly accessed from the city database. 4, the main entrance, the loading dock, an emergency exit on the west side, and a roof access hatch. However, these blueprints date back to 1987. There's no telling what modifications Mendoza might have made. What about nearby buildings? 2 other warehouses within 100 yards, both genuinely abandoned. Street access from 3 directions. Harbor on the east side, a potential water escape route if things deteriorate. Marco scrutinized the map. It's defensible. They made a good choice. They chose predictably, Lorenzo corrected. Mendoza invariably uses that district for sensitive operations. He believes that, because it's his territory, he's untouchable there. He's not wrong, Marco pointed out. If we strike a location that deep in his territory, every soldier he possesses will respond. We'll be outnumbered 10 to 1. Then we won't give them time to respond. Lorenzo checked his watch again. 12:47 a.m., Vincent maintains surveillance. I need to know if anyone enters or leaves that warehouse. Marco, prepare the tactical team, light and fast. 6 men, suppressed weapons, extraction gear. When do we move? Marco inquired. Lorenzo gazed at the warehouse on the screen, envisioning Elena inside, likely exhausted, terrified, yet still fighting, still stalling, buying time she didn't realize anyone would utilize. We move at 4 a.m., he stated. 2 hours before dawn. They'll be fatigued, expecting her to break at any moment. We'll strike when their focus is on her, not on perimeter security. Vincent nodded. I'll have communications ready. We can jam their phones, buying you a few extra minutes before reinforcements can be summoned. Do it! Lorenzo turned to depart, then paused. Vincent, one more thing. That notebook make copies, multiple copies, both physical and digital. Store them in diverse locations. Do you believe Mendoza will pursue them? I believe Elena Chen's work is worth killing for, Lorenzo said softly. And I want to ensure that if anything happens to her, her genius doesn't perish with her. He exited the tech room, Marco following closely. In a matter of hours, they would be entering a war zone. Not the kind of war fought on the streets with armies, but the dangerous kind. Surgical, swift, and potentially catastrophic if even the slightest detail went awry. But Lorenzo hadn't forged an empire by playing it safe. He had built it by recognizing inherent value when he encountered it. And Elena Chen? Tonight, she was the most valuable asset in Chicago. It was time to collect his investment. At 1:30 a.m., 2 unmarked vehicles silently glided into the shadows near the Chicago docks. No headlights illuminated the darkness, no engine noise rose above a low idle. Inside were 4 of Lorenzo's most skilled scouts, armed with surveillance equipment that individually cost more than the cars themselves. Tommy Ritchie, Lorenzo's reconnaissance specialist, knelt on the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse 200 yards from the target location. Through night vision binoculars, he systematically counted guards. 3 at the north entrance, he whispered into his radio. 2 patrolling the perimeter, another 2 on the loading dock, all carrying automatic weapons, making no attempt to conceal them. Confidence or stupidity? Marco's voice crackled through his earpiece. Both, Tommy replied, slowly panning the binoculars. They believe they're secure in their own territory. Their movements are sloppy. One guy's smoking, another's on his phone, but the weaponry is serious. AK-47s, perhaps MP5s. These aren't mere street soldiers. This is trained security. In the car below, Marco sat beside Lorenzo, monitoring the audio feed. Lorenzo stared intently at the warehouse. his expression impenetrable in the gloom. "What about the building itself?" Marco prompted. "Two industrial generators running on the east side," Tommy reported. "Large ones. They're powering something that demands significant electricity." As heat signatures emanating from exhaust vents signaled cooling systems operating at maximum capacity, Lorenzo deduced the presence of a truly substantial computer setup within the warehouse. He observed the guards' movement patterns, noting their predictable 20-minute rotations and consistent routes. "They're careful," he murmured, "but also predictable." Suddenly, Tommy, positioned nearby, reported an approaching vehicle. A white van pulled up to the loading dock, and two men swiftly unloaded what appeared to be more computer equipment, specifically server racks. "Looks like they're still setting things up for Elena," Lorenzo commented sotto voce. "They're providing her with everything she needs to crack the vault." Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Lisa Moreno, Tommy's partner, had positioned a parabolic microphone aimed at the warehouse's main entrance. The device expertly isolated voices from background noise, allowing her to pick up conversations from hundreds of feet away. She fine-tuned the frequency, filtering out the hum of generators and distant traffic until Spanish voices emerged. "Got audio?" Lisa whispered, immediately beginning to translate. Her bilingual upbringing in Chicago's little village neighborhood proved invaluable. Through her headphones, the conversation between two guards became distressingly clear. "Told him the girl's being difficult." "Difficult how?" "Won't cooperate. Keeps making mistakes on purpose. Says the code's more complex than she thought." The second guard added, "Mendoza's getting impatient. He wants this done by sunrise." A chilling question followed. "What if she can't do it?" After a tense silence came the grim reply, "Then she's not useful anymore." Lisa's jaw clenched. She relayed the exchange to Marco, who instantly passed it to Lorenzo. "They're threatening her," Marco said, his voice laced with anger. "Of course they are," Lorenzo responded, checking his watch. It was 1:47 a.m. Sunrise was at 6:15 a.m. "She's stalling. Smart girl, but she can't stall forever." Tommy's voice crackled through the comms once more. "Boss, more activity. 3 more guards just came out for a smoke break. They're talking about—" He adjusted his position, zooming in on the guards' faces. One of them bore a distinctive snake and cross tattoo on his neck, the same man Dye had described. "That's our positive ID," Tommy confirmed. "These are definitely Mendoza's people." Lisa fine-tuned her microphone, now catching fragments of the guard's conversation in English. "Doesn't matter if she cooperates. Once the vault's open, boss says no witnesses. Girl knows too much." Another guard inquired, "What about the brother?" The first responded, "Mendoza's got people looking. Kid's probably hiding somewhere. Won't matter. After sunrise, none of this matters." Lorenzo's expression hardened. They weren't just after Elena. They would eventually go after Danny too. Loose ends, he thought. "How many total inside?" he asked Tommy. "Counting guards and the tech people who came in earlier, 15, maybe 18, Tommy reported. "Could be more in the interior sections. I can't see." Marco pulled up the building schematics on his tablet. "We'll be outnumbered 3-1, minimum." Lorenzo's resolve was steely. "Then we make every shot count." He meticulously studied the guard patterns Tommy was documenting. "What about escape routes?" Tommy replied, "The harbor's 60 yards to the east. They've got a speedboat docked there, probably their emergency exit. Streets to the north and west lead deeper into Mendoza territory. The south side is blocked by containers." Lorenzo weighed the options. "We need to extract through the north or take the water route." "Water's too exposed," Marco interjected. "Too many variables." Lorenzo conceded, "North it is. Fast extraction. Straight back to our territory. 3-minute window maximum before Mendoza's reinforcements arrive." Lisa suddenly raised a hand. "Wait, someone's talking inside? Different voice. Younger." She cranked the microphone's sensitivity, angling it toward a ventilation shaft. The audio was muffled, distorted by walls and equipment. But a female voice, exhausted yet defiant, emerged. "Already told you, this encryption has 7-layer security. Each layer needs—" A harsh, threatening male voice interrupted. "Don't care about layers. You've had 5 hours. Stop stalling and finish it." Elena's voice retorted, "I'm not stalling. Look at the code yourself if you think it's so easy." The sound of something crashing, then Elena's cry, followed by silence. Lisa's hands trembled as she removed her headphones. They're hurting her. Marco looked at Lorenzo. Boss, we need to move now. But Lorenzo held up a hand, listening intently to Tommy's ongoing surveillance report. Making a decision based on emotion was a recipe for disaster. He needed all the information. Any sign of Mendoza himself? He inquired. Negative, Tommy replied. Just his soldiers and tech people. He's probably at a secure location, waiting for confirmation the vault's open. Smart, Lorenzo admitted. Doesn't put himself at risk until the job's done. More voices filtered through Lisa's microphone guards discussing the timeline, Mendoza's orders, and how they would dispose of the girl once her work was finished. Each word was another grim portent for Elena. Lorenzo made his decision. Pull back to the staging point, he commanded. We've seen enough, boss? Tommy sounded surprised. We know their numbers, their positions, their timeline. We know Elena's alive and still fighting. That's all we need. Lorenzo's voice was cold, calculated. Gather the team. Full tactical briefing at 0300 a.m. We move at 0400 a.m. Confirmed, Marco affirmed. That gives us a 2-hour window before sunrise. Before they kill her, Lorenzo corrected pointedly. They want the vault open by dawn. We'll take her before they get their wish. In the warehouse, Elena Chin bought time she didn't know she had. With every brilliant neuron in her exhausted brain, she fought, stalled, made deliberate errors, and pretended the code was more challenging than it was. She'd been doing it for 6 hours, and she had perhaps 3 more before her captors would stop believing her. But Lorenzo Vitali was done watching. He'd seen enough to grasp the layout, the enemy, and the stakes. Now it was time to show Diego Mendoza the consequences of stealing from the king. Prep the team, Lorenzo declared, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. Tell them to bring their best gear. We're going into the belly of the beast, and we're coming out with Chicago's most valuable asset. Marco offered a grim smile. Time to go shopping? No, Lorenzo corrected. Time to go to war. The cars pulled away from the docks, vanishing into Chicago's pre-dawn darkness. In 3 hours, everything would change. Elena Chen's wrists burned where the zip ties cut into her skin. Handcuffed to a metal chair for 6 hours, her fingers cramped from typing, her back screamed from the rigid position she'd been forced into. The warehouse was freezing, or perhaps it was just the pervasive dread. Around her, 3 computer monitors glowed with her code lines of algorithms, encryption patterns, and mathematical sequences that would make most professional hackers weep with envy. Her work, her genius, was being used to decimate someone's life savings, or worse. She didn't know whose money it was. She didn't want to know. A man named Carlos stood behind her, his gun resting casually on his hip. For the last 3 hours, he had been her primary guard, meticulously observing her every keystroke. He spoke decent English, unlike some of the others who had snatched her from her apartment. You're stalling, Carlos stated, his voice flat. I'm not stupid, girl. I know what real progress looks like. Elena's hands trembled as she typed. I'm not stalling. This encryption is military grade. 7 layers of security, each one more complex than the last. You can't just... Carlos cut her off. My boss says you were 70% done when we found you. That was 6 hours ago. You should be finished by now. Your boss doesn't understand advanced cryptography, Elena shot back, immediately regretting her tone. Carlos moved closer, his shadow falling over her keyboard. My boss understands that you're a 16-year-old kid who got too smart for her own good. He also understands that if you don't finish this by sunrise... He let the threat hang in the air. Elena swallowed hard. She had been terrified when they burst into her apartment. 3 armed men moving with military precision. They had known precisely what they wanted. Her laptop, her notebooks, her. Danny had been at his friend's house. Thank God she had managed to scream at him over the phone to run, to hide, to find help. But what kind of help could a 10-year-old find against men with guns? Find the king, she had told him in those desperate seconds before they ripped the phone away. If you're ever in trouble, find the king of Chicago. It was something she'd overheard at school, whispered in hallways by kids whose older siblings ran with the wrong crowds. Lorenzo Vitali. The name was spoken with equal parts fear and respect. A mafia boss, a criminal, but supposedly a man of principles who protected those under his care. She had never imagined she would need to invoke that name. Now, sitting in this frozen warehouse, Elena prayed Danny had been clever enough to understand, clever enough to find Lorenzo Vitali, clever enough to survive. "Show me your progress," Carlos demanded. Elena brought up her latest work on the screen. To an untrained eye, it looked legitimate complex code, percentage bars indicating advancement, technical jargon that meant nothing to most people. But Elena had been deliberately sabotaging her own work for hours. She had introduced subtle errors into the algorithm, wrong variables, misplaced decimal points, details that would cause the decryption to fail at the last moment, forcing her to start over and troubleshoot. Each mistake bought her another 20 minutes, another half hour, another chance for a miracle. "This sequence here," she said, pointing to a line of code. "It's giving me errors. I need to recalculate the hash function, or the entire thing will corrupt when we attempt the final breakthrough." Carlos stared at the screen, as if it were written in ancient Greek, which, to him, it might as well have been. "How much longer?" 2 hours, maybe 3. His hand moved to his gun. "You said 2 hours 3 hours ago." "Because I keep finding new security measures." Elena's voice cracked with genuine frustration, not at the code, but at her predicament. "Whoever built this vault was paranoid. Each barrier I overcome reveals yet another trap," she whispered. "If I rush, the entire system will permanently lock down. Is that your intention?" Carlos scrutinized her face, searching for any hint of deceit. Elena had swiftly mastered the art of leveraging genuine emotion to bolster her narrative. Letting them witness her exhaustion, her terror, lent her a crucial air of authenticity. "My superior is losing patience," Carlos eventually stated, his voice flat. "And when he loses patience, dire consequences befall individuals." Elena murmured, "I comprehend." And she truly did. These men were not the type to permit her to simply walk away. She had understood, from the precise moment they dragged her from her apartment, that she was a witness, a liability, a loose end. They would undoubtedly eliminate her the instant that vault yielded, so she would guard its secrets for as long as humanly possible. As Carlos pivoted to speak into his radio, Elena's fingers darted across a notepad beside her keyboard. She swiftly recorded fabricated encryption keys, intentionally flawed algorithms, and deceptive information designed to misguide anyone who might later discover her notes. If they compelled her to complete the task, if she could no longer delay, she wanted to leave a trail of misleading breadcrumbs. At least then, even in death, she would savor the satisfaction of having outsmarted them. Yet, beneath these fabricated entries, in minuscule, barely discernible script, she had penned something else over the preceding hours, a desperate prayer, a poignant hope. "Danny, if you're reading this, I tried. I'm sorry. Be smarter than me. Be safer. Find a king. Elena." A new voice jolted her attention upward, one of the technical consultants they had brought in. A man in his 30s with expensive eyewear and weary eyes approached her workstation. Unlike the guards, he actually understood the intricacies of her work. "This error here," he remarked, indicating her screen. "This is deliberate." Elena's heart seized. "You've been inserting bugs into your own code, minor ones, easily overlooked, but I've been astute." He leaned closer, lowering his voice so the guards wouldn't overhear. "You are brilliant. This work is exceptional. But you are also engineering your own demise." Elena met his gaze. "They'll kill me regardless." "Probably," he conceded. "But if you comply, you might gain a few more hours. If you continue to obstruct—" He glanced towards Carlos. "They will inflict pain." "I don't care," Elena declared, and she meant every word. "I will not aid criminals in stealing money." The consultant's expression softened. "Noble. Foolish perhaps, but noble." He straightened, his voice now louder. "Her code has flaws. She requires at least another hour to properly debug it." Carlos swore volubly in Spanish. "The boss insists this be completed by 6 a.m. Then the boss needs to grasp that deciphering $700 million in encryption demands time." The consultant departed, leaving Elena once more alone with her guards. She returned to her screens, her hands trembling. Each keystroke represented a minute rebellion. Every deliberate error, a small victory. Outside, dawn was approaching. Her captor's patience was wearing thin, and somewhere in Chicago she prayed her younger brother had located the king, because Elena Chin was running out of time, and she was exhausting her strategies for delay. The ultimate question loomed: what would yield first, her code or her captor's mercy? She typed another line, another error, buying a few more precious minutes of life. Endure, Danny, she thought. Please endure. The king was her sole hope now, if he even existed. The subterranean space beneath Lorenzo's restaurant reeked of aged concrete and a fresher fear. No blood, no instruments of torture were visible. Lorenzo was not an orchestrator of such brutality. Yet, the solitary bare bulb suspended from the ceiling, the metal chair immovably fastened to the floor, and the soundproofed walls spoke volumes. Fear thrived in anticipation, not in brutal action. At 2:15 a.m., Marco ushered in a man with a bag obscuring his head. When Marco removed it, the man blinked, struggling against the sudden luminescence, his face already glistening with perspiration. Raone Gutierrez, a low-ranking enforcer within Mendoza's organization. Lorenzo's operatives had apprehended him 2 days prior for running protection rackets in neutral territory, a flagrant violation of their existing accord. He had been confined in a holding cell since then, awaiting either release or being made an unmistakable example. Tonight, he would prove useful. Lorenzo sat directly opposite him, impeccably composed, clad in an expensive suit, his hands clasped on the table. He exuded the air of a businessman, on the cusp of discussing a merger, not a crime boss conducting an interrogation. Ramon, Lorenzo began pleasantly, thank you for joining me. Ramon's eyes darted nervously around the room, settling on Marco by the doorway, then returning to Lorenzo. I wasn't. Relax. You are not here concerning the protection racket. Lorenzo poured water into 2 glasses from a pitcher, sliding one across to Ramon. You are here to address some inquiries regarding a warehouse on South Harbor Street. Ramon's face blanched. He left the water untouched. I don't know what your... 2847 South Harbor, Lorenzo continued smoothly. Mendoza's operation. You were present yesterday afternoon, delivering provisions to the guards. We possess photographic evidence. This was an outright fabrication, but Ramon was unaware. The man's throat constricted as he swallowed. I just deliver food. I don't know what transpires inside. Naturally, you are merely following directives. Lorenzo leaned back. Allow me to share what I know, Ramon. Then you can ascertain the extent of your desired honesty. Fair? Ramon nodded slowly. Mendoza abducted a 16-year-old girl from her residence last night. An American citizen, a high school student, an individual who has never harmed anyone. He is holding her in that warehouse, compelling her to crack an encrypted vault. Lorenzo's voice maintained its conversational tone, but his eyes were like ice. Now, I require 3 pieces of information. 1. How many individuals are guarding her? 2. What is Mendoza's contingency plan if complications arise? 3. What becomes of the girl once she completes the assignment? I can't... If Mendoza discovers I spoke... Mendoza will not discover, Marco interjected from the doorway, because you will be under protective custody before sunrise. Full immunity, a new identity if you desire it. All you need to do is provide the information we seek. And if I don't? Ramon's voice trembled. Lorenzo's expression remained impassive. Then you will return to your cell, and tomorrow morning we will contact Mendoza and inform him we apprehended you collaborating with federal investigators. We can fabricate a highly convincing paper trail. Phone records, bank deposits, meeting logs. Ramon's eyes widened in horror. You'd be signing my death warrant. No, Ramon. You signed your own when you chose to align yourself with a man who abducts children. Lorenzo took a sip of his water. I am granting you an opportunity to perform the right thing. Seize it or forego it. The silence stretched for 30 agonizing seconds. Ramon's hands quaked. His breathing quickened. Lorenzo simply waited, as unyielding as stone. Finally, Ramon broke. 18 men, he whispered. 12 guards, 6 technical personnel. They rotate shifts every 4 hours. The next rotation is at 4 a.m. Lorenzo nodded. Contingency plan. If the warehouse is raided, they evacuate to a secondary location, an old meatpacking plant on West 35th Street. Mendoza owns it through a shell company. It's configured as a safe house. Weapons, supplies, reinforced doors, and the girl. Lorenzo's voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. What happens when she opens the vault? Ramon hesitated. This was the intelligence that would irrevocably seal his fate. Tell him, Marco urged. You've already divulged enough to condemn yourself. You might as well secure full immunity. Mendoza... Ramon licked his lips. Mendoza doesn't intend to kill her, not immediately. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. Elaborate. There's a buyer from a cartel in Colombia. They heard Mendoza captured a genius hacker, a child who cracked encryption their own people couldn't touch. They want her. The ambient temperature in the room seemed to plummet 10 degrees. Want her for what? Marco demanded, though the answer was chillingly evident. To work for them permanently, to compromise their rival's security, steal financial data, infiltrate government systems. Raoni looked physically ill. The buyer offered $2 million. Once the vault is opened and Mendoza confirms her capabilities, the girl is flown to Bogotá on a private plane, a 6 a.m. flight from a private airfield. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. This scenario was far worse than a simple execution. Elena wouldn't merely die. She would vanish into international trafficking, compelled to exploit her brilliance for cartels until she was utterly consumed and discarded. Where is the airfield? His voice was lethally calm. Rockford, a small private strip Mendoza uses for smuggling, 40 miles northwest of Chicago. Lorenzo looked at Marco, who was already calculating. That's an hour's drive from the warehouse. If they move her at 5 a.m., we would never intercept them in time, Lorenzo concluded. He turned back to Raon. This Colombian buyer, does he have representatives here in Chicago? 2 representatives. They are at a downtown hotel, awaiting confirmation. Once Mendoza gives the directive, they handle the transport. Names? I don't know names, only that they are serious individuals, ex-military. They won't relinquish the girl without a fierce struggle. Lorenzo rose, buttoning his suit jacket. The interrogation was concluded. Ramon had provided them with every crucial piece of information, revealing that the stakes were considerably higher than a mere rescue operation. Marco, place Ramon under protective custody, full protection until this entire situation is resolved. Wait, Ramon interjected quickly. I told you everything. I'm safe, right? Lorenzo regarded him with something akin to pity. Ramon, you have just betrayed one of the most perilous men in Chicago. Safety is a relative concept, but you will be alive, which is more than you would be if we had returned you to Mendoza. He walked towards the door, then paused. One more detail. Is Mendoza planning to be at the warehouse when the vault is opened? No, he never gets his hands soiled. He'll be at his estate in Kenilworth, awaiting confirmation. Excellent. Lorenzo's smile was cold and as sharp as a blade. Then he won't see us approaching. As they ascended the stairs back to the main level, Marco spoke quietly. Boss, if the Colombians are implicated, this is a far larger operation than we initially perceived. International trafficking. I am aware of what it is, Lorenzo cut him off, and I am aware of what we are going to do about it. We hit the warehouse at 4 a.m. As planned, yes, but more than just extracting Elena, we're sending an unequivocal message to every cartel, every trafficker, every scoundrel who dares to believe they can abduct children from the streets of Chicago. Lorenzo's eyes glinted like polished diamonds. The message? This city belongs to me, and I safeguard what is mine. He glanced at his watch. It was 2:47 a.m. In merely an hour, his elite team would breach the warehouse. In under 3, Elena Chin would either be liberated or they would all perish. Prep the team, Lorenzo commanded. Full tactical gear. And Marco? Yes, boss. Tell them to pack extra ammunition. If those Colombians make an appearance, we're taking no prisoners. Marco nodded, then vanished to make the necessary calls. Lorenzo stood alone in the hallway, contemplating a 16-year-old girl, fighting for her life, armed only with a brilliant mind and desperate bravery. Not if I get there first, he mused. Time to honor that promise. At 3:58 a.m., 6 shadows moved stealthily through the Chicago docks, like wisps of smoke. Lorenzo's tactical unit was seasoned in such operations. Extractions, targeted eliminations, assignments demanding precision over sheer firepower. Clad in black tactical gear, faces masked, and weapons fitted with suppressors, they carried no badges, no identification. Should this mission falter, they were, in essence, ghosts. Lorenzo led the advance despite Marco's protests. This, however, was not a task he could delegate. Elena had requested the king. The king would answer. From an adjacent building, Tommy Ritchie provided overwatch, his night vision scope trained on the warehouse. 2 guards at the north entrance, 1 smoking. The east dock has 3, but 2 are inside the loading bay. West emergency exit, a single guard, looks half asleep. "Copy," Lorenzo whispered into his radio. "Marco, take the dock entrance. Vincent, you're with me at the main door. Silent takedowns only. We don't want them calling for backup." "Understood." They divided into 2 teams. Lorenzo, Vincent, and a soldier named Tony crept toward the main entrance. Marco led the others around to the loading dock. The guard at the front was young, perhaps 25, an assault rifle casually slung over his shoulder. He was engrossed with his phone, oblivious to the shadows where Lorenzo's team materialized. Vincent moved first. Trained in close-quarters combat by ex-special forces, his movements were swift, efficient, and utterly silent. The guard crumpled without a sound, unconscious before he hit the ground. They zip-tied his hands and dragged him behind a dumpster. "North entrance clear," Vincent reported. "Dock entrance clear. 2 down." "Non-lethal," Marco's voice crackled back. "Perimeter guards completing rotation. You've got a 90-second window before they circle back," Tommy's voice chimed in. "Moving in," Lorenzo commanded. Vincent pulled out an electronic lockpick, attaching it to the main door's security panel. The device cycled through combinations in mere seconds, a testament to Elena's hacking prowess. Ironically, the lock clicked open. They entered a dim corridor, emergency lighting casting everything in a sickly yellow hue. The smell hit Lorenzo immediately. Oil, electronics, and the acrid scent of too many people in too small a space. From deeper within the building came the hum of generators and computer equipment. Marco's team simultaneously breached from the loading dock. Now, they were 12 against 18, with the crucial element of surprise on their side. "Power controls should be in the east wing," Vincent whispered, consulting the blueprints on his tactical tablet. "Kill the main power. Their computers go dark. That's when we extract the girl." "Do it," Lorenzo ordered. Vincent and Tony peeled off, moving toward the electrical room. Lorenzo and 2 others advanced toward the center of the warehouse, where the heat signatures had been concentrated. They encountered the first hostile 30 seconds later. A guard rounded a corner, coffee cup in hand, and froze upon seeing 3 armed figures in tactical gear. His hand moved reflexively toward his radio. Lorenzo's suppressed pistol coughed twice. The man dropped, coffee spreading across the concrete. "Contact," Lorenzo reported calmly. "Lethal force authorized. They won't take us alive anyway." All pretense of stealth evaporated. From somewhere in the building, someone shouted in Spanish. Footsteps pounded on metal grating. An alarm began to wail. "Power's cut!" Vincent's voice came through. The lights died. Emergency backup systems activated 2 seconds later, bathing everything in an ominous red glow. Then, the gunfire began. Mendoza's guards poured out of side rooms, weapons blazing. The warehouse erupted into chaos, muzzle flashes in the darkness, bullets sparking off metal, shouts in English and Spanish mixing with the staccato rhythm of automatic weapons. Lorenzo's team returned fire with surgical precision. These were not mere street thugs. They were professionals, trained for exactly this scenario. Cover, advance, suppress. Marco's voice coordinated movements over the radio while Tommy called out enemy positions from his overwatch. 2 hostile, second-floor catwalk. "Got 'em," Tony responded, his rifle barking twice. Lorenzo moved through the pandemonium as if he owned it, heading toward the warehouse's center, where intelligence indicated Elena was being held. 2 guards attempted to stop him. He dropped both without breaking stride. A reinforced door ahead, locked from inside the computer room. "Breaching!" Lorenzo called out. Marco appeared beside him with a small explosive charge. They stacked up on either side of the door. Marco planted the charge, counting down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The explosion was deafening within the enclosed space. The door blew inward, smoke billowing out. Lorenzo went through first, weapon raised. The room was precisely as Vincent had predicted. Computers everywhere, monitors still glowing from battery backup, cables snaking across the floor like industrial spaghetti. And in the center, handcuffed to a chair, sat a teenage girl, Elena Chin. She looked up at the sound of the breach, eyes wide with terror. Her dark hair was matted with sweat. her wrists bloody from struggling against the zip ties. Tear tracks were still visible on her dirt-smudged face, but her eyes held a fierce intelligence, even through the fear. Behind her, a guard raised his weapon. Lorenzo was faster, a single shot, center mass. The guard collapsed. More gunfire erupted in the hallway. Marco and the others were holding off reinforcements, but they wouldn't last long. The element of surprise was gone. Now it was a battle of firepower and numbers, and the numbers were not in their favor. Lorenzo approached Elena slowly, holstering his weapon so she could see his hands. "Elena, chin." She nodded, unable to speak. "Your brother Danny sent me." Lorenzo pulled out a knife and severed the zip ties binding her wrists. "You told him to find the king. Well, here I am." Elena's eyes welled with tears. "Danny, is he safe?" "He's safe, under my protection." Lorenzo helped her stand. Her legs nearly buckled. How long had she been in that chair? He studied her intently. "But we need to move now." "The computers, my work." "Leave it. We've got copies of your notebook. That's all we need." An explosion rocked the building. Marco's voice shouted over the radio. "Boss, they called for backup. We've got vehicles approaching, multiple hostiles." "Time to go," Lorenzo said firmly. He looked Elena in the eyes, this brilliant, terrified, impossibly brave girl who had endured hours against killers. "Can you run?" She nodded. "Then run with me." He offered his hand. Elena stared at it for half a second. The hand of Chicago's most dangerous crime boss extended in protection. Then she took it. "Time to go, genius," Lorenzo said. They ran. Behind them, the warehouse exploded into a war zone. Ahead lay freedom, survival, and the genesis of something neither of them could have predicted. But first, they had to escape alive. And with Mendoza's reinforcements closing in, that was far from guaranteed. They made it out with 30 seconds to spare. Lorenzo's team extracted through the north entrance, laying down suppressive fire, while Elena ran between Marco and Lorenzo, shielded by their bodies. Two of Lorenzo's men took bullets but kept moving, adrenaline and training overriding pain. Mendoza's reinforcements arrived just as their vehicles screeched away from the docks, bullets sparking off the rear bumper. But by then, Lorenzo's team was already in neutral territory, and pursuit meant an all-out street war. Neither side was prepared for at 4:30 a.m. They drove in silence, Elena wedged between Lorenzo and Marco in the back seat, trembling from shock and exhaustion. "You're safe now?" Lorenzo said quietly. "Nobody's going to hurt you." Elena nodded, but didn't speak, couldn't speak. 6 hours of captivity, terror, and relentless struggle had finally caught up to her. By 5 a.m., they arrived at Lorenzo's estate in the suburbs, a compound disguised as a luxury home, surrounded by impenetrable walls, surveillance cameras, and armed men who knew how to use their weapons. Danny waited anxiously in the foyer. When he saw Elena, he rushed to her, and she collapsed into his arms, both of them weeping. Lorenzo granted them privacy, stepping into his study where his advisors were already assembling. 30 minutes later, after Elena had showered, eaten, and been examined by Lorenzo's private doctor, she sat in the study, wrapped in a blanket that dwarfed her slender frame. Danny sat beside her, holding her hand as if he would never let go. Lorenzo sat across from them, flanked by Vincent, Marco, Rita, and James. The notebook was spread open on the desk between them. "Elena," Lorenzo began gently, "I need to understand exactly what you found, not just for your safety, but because what you discovered has profound implications for everyone in this room." Elena took a shaky breath. "I thought it was just a puzzle. Someone posted an encrypted string on Cryptic Minds, a forum I visit. It looked challenging, so I started working on it." "When did you realize it wasn't just a puzzle?" Vincent asked. "About 3 days. Elena's voice grew stronger as she transitioned into technical territory. The encryption patterns were unsettlingly sophisticated, a military-grade SHA-256 variant interwoven with bespoke algorithms. No dilettante would craft such intricate code merely for amusement. Retrieving her phone, which she'd miraculously retained throughout her ordeal, she accessed a notes application. I initiated a trace, pinpointed the IP address, and followed it to that warehouse. That's when the gravity of the situation hit me. "The vault," Lorenzo stated. "Mendoza's cryptocurrency holdings." "Not just Mendoza's," Elena countered, her eyes reflecting a blend of apprehension and exhilaration. That's what I attempted to convey, but they wouldn't heed my warnings. The vault I uncovered isn't a singular repository, it's a central hub. The room fell silent. Vincent leaned forward intently. What precisely do you mean by a hub? The encryption I was deciphering wasn't safeguarding one vault, it was protecting an entire network. Elena's words flowed with increased velocity now, her brilliant mind finally articulating the complex anomaly she had grappled with internally. Once I delved sufficiently deep into the code, I discovered branching pathways and disparate wallet addresses, all interconnected through a primary node. The initial vault, the one everyone assumed I was cracking, is linked to at least 7 other substantial cryptocurrency accounts. James Park's eyes widened in astonishment. Multiple organizations? I suspect so, she affirmed. I identified transaction patterns that simply don't align. Varying timings, differing sums, distinct signatures. It's as if, she paused, searching for the precise articulation. Someone established a central bank for criminal syndicates. All their illicit funds converge through this hub, shielded by shared encryption. This mechanism ensures no single individual can access it without the master key. Lorenzo exchanged a significant look with his advisors. A shared vault. Multiple cartels either pooling their resources or laundering them, Rita clarified. Concealing money through a collective system, making it substantially more challenging to trace back to any solitary operation. Precisely, Elena confirmed, pulling up additional notes. I'd mapped at least 7 distinct branches before they apprehended me. Based on transaction volumes and patterns, I estimated the total holdings at... She paused, double-checking her calculations. Between 2 and 3 billion. The colossal figure resonated through the room like a seismic shockwave. Billion, Marco repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. Not million? Billion, Elena affirmed, distributed across numerous accounts, yet all accessible via the central vault. Whoever commands the master encryption possesses complete oversight and access. Vincent, already tapping away at his laptop, activated dark web monitoring tools. If her assessment is accurate, this extends beyond merely Mendoza's operation. This is a consortium, multiple crime families collaborating on a shared financial infrastructure. Which implies, Rita articulated slowly, Elena didn't just uncover Mendoza's money, she uncovered everyone's money. The profound implications settled over the room with a palpable weight. That's why they desired her so vehemently, James breathed, a newfound understanding dawning. Not simply to crack Mendoza's vault, but to gain entry to the entire network. Whoever controls that hub controls everything, Lorenzo concluded, his gaze fixed on Elena. And you can crack it. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded. I was 70% through when they seized me, perhaps 80% now, if given the proper equipment and sufficient time. The encryption is ingenious, but it possesses vulnerabilities. Its designer prioritized inaccessibility over absolute perfection. How long? Lorenzo inquired. 8 hours of concentrated effort, possibly less. The room erupted into a flurry of urgent whispers. Marco and Vincent debated security ramifications. Rita and James discussed potential legal exposures. Everyone spoke over one another, grappling with the magnitude of the revelation. Lorenzo raised a hand, and silence descended. He regarded Elena, this utterly exhausted, brilliantly insightful, and impossibly brave teenage girl who had inadvertently unearthed the criminal underworld's Fort Knox. You're perched atop a gold mine, he stated quietly. And every cartel, every crime family connected to that vault, they all comprehend it now. Mendoza will have informed them of your capabilities, of your discovery. Elena's face paled. They'll all come after me. Yes, Lorenzo conceded honestly. They will. Danny gripped his sister's hand more tightly. But you'll protect her, won't you? You promised. Lorenzo's expression softened as he looked at the boy. I did, and I will. He then turned back to Elena. However, you must grasp the full scope of what you've stumbled into. You're no longer merely valuable to me. You are the most dangerous individual in Chicago, dangerous to everyone who has money in that vault. What do we do? Elena whispered. Lorenzo leaned back, his mind already calculating angles, strategies, and survival plans. "We complete what you initiated," he declared, "but on our stipulated terms. You will map the entire network for me, every branch, every account, every connection. We will meticulously document everything. We'll create insurance information to be released should anything happen to you or Danny." "Mutually assured destruction," Rita murmured, a glint in her eye. "They cannot touch her without exposing themselves." "Precisely?" Lorenzo's smile was chilling. "Elena, you have inadvertently declared war on Chicago's entire criminal underground. Now, we will ensure they are too terrified to retaliate." Elena looked at her brother, then at Lorenzo. "And if I comply, if I assist you, what becomes of us?" "You become untouchable," Lorenzo stated simply. "Under my protection, forever." The genius and the king, forging an alliance born of sheer desperation and dazzling brilliance, neither realizing it would fundamentally alter everything. For 3 days, Elena worked within a secure room Lorenzo had furnished in his compound. It resembled a teenager's dream tech lab. 3 high-end computers, multiple monitors, an ergonomic chair, and snacks within easy reach. Yet, the reinforced door and the armed guards stationed outside served as a stark reminder that this arrangement was not a gift, but rather a combination of protection and powerful leverage. Vincent collaborated alongside her, translating her brilliant, yet occasionally disheveled, explanations into documentation his team could utilize. Danny remained in the corner, diligently working on his homework, refusing to leave his sister's side. By the second day, Elena had meticulously mapped the entire vault network. 7 major branches, each belonging to distinct criminal organizations: Mendoza's Southside Cartel, the Russian mob operating out of West Chicago, 2 rival Mexican cartels, a Chinese triad, a Nigerian fraud ring, and 1 branch that Vincent couldn't immediately identify. The transactions were so meticulously laundered and obscured that they screamed professional. "Could be international terrorism," Vincent suggested, "or a rogue government operation. Either way, they're connected to everyone else." Elena pulled up a visualization she had created, a network diagram vividly illustrating the flow of money between the branches. "It's actually brilliant. Each organization deposits their ill-gotten gains into their designated branch. The central hub then automatically launders it through thousands of microtransactions, subsequently redistributing it as clean investment returns. It's akin to a criminal stock market." Lorenzo studied the diagram with cold appreciation. "Who manages the hub?" "No single person," Elena replied. "It's algorithmic, fully automated. That's precisely what makes it so secure. No single point of failure, no human element susceptible to betrayal." "Except you cracked it," Vincent pointed out. "I discovered the back door," Elena corrected. "The system's designer left themselves administrative access, presumably for maintenance. That's the vulnerability I exploited." Lorenzo turned to James Park, who had been conducting financial analyses. "What's our move?" James spread documents across the table. "We have several options. Option 1. We drain the entire vault. $3 billion appears in accounts we control. We become overnight billionaires, and every criminal organization in North America declares war on us." "Pass," Lorenzo stated dryly. "Option 2. We sell the access codes to the highest bidder. Let someone else bear the brunt of the heat and forfeit all our leverage." "Also pass." "Option 3, Rita interjected, "is the astute play. We leverage this information strategically, releasing portions of it to authorities, sowing chaos among our adversaries, and positioning ourselves as the sole stable operation left standing." Lorenzo's eyes glinted. "Continue." Rita pulled up a map of Chicago, marked with territorial boundaries. "Mendoza has encroached upon our territory for years. The Russians have systematically undercut our protection rates. The cartels incessantly compete with our import operations. Currently, they are all cooperating through this shared vault. But what transpires if they cease to trust one another?" "They'll tear each other apart," Marco interjected, grasping the implication. "Precisely. We don't drain the vault. We meticulously expose fragments of it. Anonymous tips to the FBI regarding Mendoza's shell companies, leaked documents concerning Russian money laundering, just enough to trigger federal raids and freeze assets. Vincent nodded enthusiastically. And while they're grappling with law enforcement and blaming each other for the leaks, we secure the core system. Elena creates new encryption that only we control. The vault becomes ours without us ever having to pilfer a single dollar. Lorenzo looked at Elena. Can you achieve that? Lock them out while maintaining the illusion that the system remains functional? Elena bit her lip, deep in thought. I would need to construct a new layer of encryption atop the existing structure. From their perspective, everything would appear normal. They could view their balances, monitor transactions, but they wouldn't actually be able to access the money without a key that only we possess. How long? 2 days, perhaps 3. And the federal tip? Lorenzo looked at Rita. I have contacts, former prosecutors, current FBI agents who are indebted to me. I can funnel them information through untraceable channels. Rita's smile was sharp. We could have raids commencing by the end of the week. Lorenzo paced the room, every eye following his movements. This was the pivotal moment, the decision that would either elevate his enterprise or utterly destroy it. Finally, he turned to Elena. Begin constructing the new encryption. Vincent, assist her. I demand total lockdown of that vault by Friday. Elena nodded, already turning back to her computers. Rita, prepare the federal packages. I want Mendoza targeted first. His shell companies, his offshore accounts, everything. Make it appear as if an insider within his organization betrayed him. Consider it done. Marco, escalate security across all our operations. When this explodes, pandemonium will ensue, and I need our people prepared, Lorenzo commanded. Yes, boss, Marco replied. James, initiate plans to transfer our assets offshore. Should the feds begin scrutinizing criminal financial networks, I want no trails leading back to us. Lorenzo surveyed his team, his extended family. Truly, in 72 hours, we will fundamentally alter the power dynamics in Chicago. Those organizations that have constantly challenged us, tested us, and treated us as merely another crew are about to discover why one does not cross the king. By Thursday morning, federal agents had simultaneously raided 6 of Mendoza's shell companies. That afternoon, 3 of his bank accounts were frozen, and 2 of his key lieutenants were in custody. On Friday, an anonymous leak to the Chicago Tribune exposed the Russian mob's money laundering operations, instantly rendering their legitimate business fronts toxic. Saturday saw ICE raids on properties connected to both Mexican cartels, resulting in dozens of arrests and the seizure of millions in cash. The criminal underworld erupted into a paranoid frenzy. Who was the informant? Who was cooperating with federal authorities? Each organization pointed fingers. Old alliances shattered and trust evaporated, igniting street violence. Throughout it all, Lorenzo's operation functioned seamlessly, entirely untouched, standing above the melee. While everyone else descended into conflict, Elena Chen was meticulously erecting impenetrable digital defenses around $3 billion that no one else even knew existed. On Sunday evening, she finally looked up from her computer, exhausted but triumphant. It's done. The vault is locked. Only we possess access now. Vincent meticulously verified her work, running numerous tests against the encryption. It's flawless. They can see their money, but they can't touch it, and they'll never realize we hold the key. Lorenzo stood by his window, observing the sunset over Chicago. Somewhere, Mendoza was desperately attempting to salvage the remnants of his empire. The Russians were embroiled in internal warfare. The cartels were hemorrhaging both funds and personnel. Yet, within his compound, a 16-year-old girl had just placed the entire fortune of the criminal underworld directly into his hands. "Boss," Marco announced from the doorway. "We're receiving calls. Every organization wants a meeting. They imagine we're somehow unaffected by all this chaos." Lorenzo smiled faintly. "Inform them I will consider their requests only after they acknowledge proper territorial boundaries. You're going to make them plead for peace." "No," Lorenzo corrected. "I'm going to make them understand that Chicago is mine. It always has been." He turned to Elena, who was showing something on her screen to Danny, likely explaining the intricate mathematics behind her encryption. 2 young individuals, one desperate gamble. And now the king commanded every card. "Welcome to the family, Elena," Lorenzo said softly. She looked up, slightly surprised. "You have just become the most indispensable person in my organization. he continued, and I protect what is valuable. Elena managed a weary smile. Does this mean I'm a criminal now? No, Lorenzo replied. It means you are untouchable. The genius and the king. The alliance was irrevocably sealed. On Monday afternoon, Lorenzo summoned Elena and Danny to his private study. This room was a stark contrast to the strategic war room. It was filled with leather-bound books, exquisite artwork, and furnishings that spoke of legacy rather than raw power. This was where Lorenzo conducted his most crucial business. Elena and Danny sat opposite his desk, both visibly nervous despite the protection they had enjoyed for days. Danny nervously fiddled with the sleeve of his new jacket. Lorenzo's people had provided them both with appropriate attire, since returning to their apartment was no longer an option. Lorenzo poured 3 glasses of sparkling cider, sliding 2 across to them. Danny looked perplexed until Elena whispered, "It's like a business meeting." "It is a business meeting," Lorenzo confirmed, settling into his chair. "One of the most consequential I have ever held." Elena straightened her posture, attempting to appear older than her 16 years. "You want something from me in exchange for the vault access?" she inquired. "Smart girl, but not quite correct," Lorenzo said, taking a sip of his drink. "I want to discuss your future, both of your futures." Danny spoke up, his voice small but courageous. "Are you sending us away?" "Quite the opposite," Lorenzo clarified, leaning forward. "Elena, in the past week, you have accomplished something extraordinary. You inadvertently exposed a $3 billion criminal network, survived kidnapping by one of Chicago's most dangerous cartels, and then assisted me in securing that entire network with encryption that even the NSA would struggle to breach." Elena nodded slowly. "Most people in your predicament would be liabilities, problems to be resolved, witnesses to be silenced," Lorenzo stated matter-of-factly. "But you are not most people. You are a once-in-a-generation genius who happens to be 16 years old and currently has no place to go." "Our apartment," Elena began. "Is compromised," Lorenzo gently interrupted. "Mendoza knows where you resided, as do the Russians, and likely every other organization that has realized someone has locked them out of their assets. You can never return there." The words struck Elena like a physical blow. Her home, her life, everything she had rebuilt after her parents' death, all gone. Danny's hand found hers under the desk. "So, what becomes of us?" Elena asked, struggling to maintain a steady voice. Lorenzo rose and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "I am going to make you an offer, not a threat, not a demand. An actual offer that you are entirely free to decline." "And if we refuse?" Elena probed cautiously. "Then I will arrange new identities for both of you, settle you in another city with sufficient funds to live comfortably, and we will never communicate again," Lorenzo said, turning to face them. "You would be safe. I would ensure that. But you would be alone. 2 children against the world." Elena considered this. A new city, new names, constantly looking over their shoulders. Danny attempting to form friendships while concealing his true identity. Her trying to pursue her passion for mathematics and coding, while pretending she hadn't just broken into the criminal underworld's bank. "What is the offer?" she asked. Lorenzo returned to his desk. "You remain here under my protection. Danny continues his schooling, privately, with an excellent education and everything he requires. You too continue your studies. I have connections at Northwestern University. They boast one of the country's premier computer science programs. You could enroll early, on a full scholarship, no questions asked." Elena's eyes widened. Northwestern was a dream school, one she had never believed she could afford. "In exchange," Lorenzo continued, "you work for me. Not as muscle, not as a criminal, but as precisely what you are, a genius. You will assist Vincent in securing our digital operations, protecting our networks, and occasionally offer consultation on matters requiring your specific skill set." "You want me to be your hacker?" Elena clarified. "I want you to be my technology advisor," Lorenzo corrected. "There is a distinction. Hackers breach systems for one-time operations. Advisors build enduring security, foster innovation, and safeguard assets. You would have a legitimate role, a legitimate salary, and legitimate protections." "Legitimate," Elena repeated, skepticism evident in her tone. "In a criminal organization? Lorenzo smiled slightly. I operate businesses, Elena. Restaurants, real estate, import-export operations. Yes, some of those businesses aren't entirely legal, but many are. You would be working in the legitimate sectors, with occasional consultation on the rest. Rita Duca entered the study, carrying a stack of folders. She placed them on the desk. Contracts, legal documents, all impeccably formatted. This is a formal employment offer, Rita explained. An annual salary of $150,000, plus housing, educational expenses for both of you, health insurance, and a trust fund for Danny's future education. Completely legal, filed with the IRS, everything above board. Elena stared at the number. She had been earning perhaps $30,000 a year with her freelance work, barely enough to cover rent and Danny's needs. And what about the other part? She asked. The vault, the encryption, the criminal aspects. Kept entirely separate, Rita assured her. On paper, you are a technology consultant. What you consult on is a matter between you and Lorenzo. Plausible deniability. Danny tugged Elena's sleeve. Does this mean we can stay together? Lorenzo's expression softened. It means you would be family, Danny. Not by blood, but the kind that truly matters. You would reside here, in the compound. There's an entire wing prepared for both of you. Your own rooms, your own space, but never alone, never unprotected. Why? Elena suddenly asked. Why go through all this for us? You could simply force me to work for you. You're a crime boss. You don't need to offer contracts and college funds. Lorenzo sat back down, meeting her gaze directly. Because I am not interested in slaves or prisoners, Elena. I am interested in loyalty, genuine loyalty. The kind that stems from respect, not fear. He gestured towards the contracts. Your parents passed away 2 years ago. You have been raising Danny alone, working yourself to exhaustion, attempting to be both sister and parent. You are brilliant, but you are 16. You shouldn't have to bear that burden by yourself. His voice acquired a different quality, not the cold crime boss, but something more akin to human emotion. I have built an empire by understanding value, and you are the most valuable asset I have encountered in 30 years. Not because of what you can steal from me, but because of what you can build, what you can protect, what you can become. He leaned forward. A king does not steal from geniuses, Elena. He makes them his allies. He provides them with resources, protection, and the freedom to flourish. Because a genius who chooses loyalty is worth more than 100 soldiers who serve out of fear. Elena looked down at the contracts, then at Danny, who was watching her with desperate hope. If I agree, she said slowly, can Danny have a normal life? School, friends, everything? He needs to be cautious, but yes, he can be a child. As normal as circumstances allow, Lorenzo confirmed about Danny. And me? Can I continue my studies? Keep learning? She inquired. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Your intellect is your most potent weapon. I want it honed, he replied. Elena drew a deep breath. With no parents, no home, and no safe alternatives, her options were stark. She could flee, accept Lorenzo's offer of relocation, and live the rest of her life constantly looking over her shoulder. Alternatively, she could embrace this peculiar partnership with a man who had not only saved her life, but also genuinely seemed to appreciate her abilities. Picking up a pen, she asked, "Where do I sign?" Lorenzo's smile was genuine, warm, and tinged with pride. Welcome to the family, Elena Chen. Danny's beaming face could have illuminated the entire room. The genius and the king had formalized their alliance, ensuring Chicago's underworld would never be the same. 6 weeks later, Elena Chen stood in her laboratory, truly hers, surrounded by technology she had only ever dreamed of. 3 workstations with top-tier processors, 6 monitors arrayed in a semicircle, a server rack softly humming in the corner, and 2 walls adorned with whiteboards covered in her precise handwriting. Algorithms, security protocols, and mathematical proofs that would bring doctoral candidates to tears. She was currently coding a new firewall system for Lorenzo's legitimate businesses, safeguarding them from corporate espionage. It was work entirely legal and utterly captivating. Through the lab's windows, she could see the estate grounds. Danny was playing basketball with Marco's teenage nephew, both boys laughing as their shots missed the hoop. The sound brought a smile to her face. Danny, enrolled in a private school under a carefully constructed identity, had made friends, joined the chess club, and was finally behaving like a normal 10-year-old, rather than someone burdened by the weight of survival. He was happy, and that alone validated Elena's decision. Knock knock, Vincent announced from the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use some fuel. Elena accepted the cup with gratitude. Vincent had become a blend of colleague and older brother, teaching her advanced cybersecurity techniques while learning from her innovative approaches to problems that had stumped him for years. "How's the firewall progressing?" he asked. "Almost finished. This design should be impenetrable to anything less than state-level hackers," she responded, pulling up her code to display its elegant architecture, multi-layered authentication, quantum-resistant encryption, and adaptive response protocols. Vincent whistled appreciatively. "Northwestern is going to adore you. You start in January, right?" "Early enrollment program," Elena confirmed. "Computer science and mathematics double major. Lorenzo arranged everything." She still found it hard to believe. College at 16, a full scholarship, studying her passions without concern for rent, food, or Danny's safety. It felt like a dream she would soon awaken from. But it wasn't a dream, it was her new reality. In his office, Lorenzo reviewed reports with Rita and James. "Mendoza is finished," James announced, sliding documents across the desk. "Federal prosecution on money laundering charges. His assets are frozen, his soldiers scattered. The Southside operation collapsed completely." "The Russians?" Lorenzo inquired. "Infighting," Rita reported with satisfaction. 3 different factions claiming leadership, all blaming each other for the security breaches. They're too busy destroying themselves to pose a threat to anyone else. The cartels retreated to their home territories. They lost so much money in the raids that they can't afford Chicago operations anymore. James added with a smile. "The power vacuum you created? We filled it quietly, efficiently. Our territories have expanded 30% without firing a single additional shot." Lorenzo nodded, pleased but not surprised. When you controlled $3 billion in hidden assets and had dismantled your rivals through strategic information leaks, expansion was inevitable. "Any blowback?" he asked Rita. "None directly. The feds are still investigating the organizations we exposed, but they haven't connected anything to us. As far as they're concerned, we're legitimate businessmen who got lucky when our competitors imploded." "And the vault remains locked tight," Vincent said, entering the office. "Elena's encryption is holding perfectly. Every organization connected to that network can see their money, but none of them can access it. They're trapped in financial purgatory." "Have any of them figured out we control it?" Lorenzo asked. "Not yet. They're too busy suspecting each other," Vincent replied, taking a seat. "But eventually, someone will realize we're the only operation that didn't get hurt, the only ones who grew stronger. By then," Lorenzo said calmly, "we'll wield so much legitimate power that it won't matter. Let them suspect. They can't prove anything, and they can't touch us without exposing their own criminal activities." He rose and walked to the window overlooking Elena's lab. She was working intently, completely absorbed in her code. Danny's laughter drifted up from the basketball court. 2 kids, 1 desperate gamble 6 weeks ago, and now everything had changed. That evening, Lorenzo visited Elena's lab. She was still working despite the late hour, though she had switched from firewalls to what looked like a research paper. "Homework?" he asked. Elena jumped slightly, then smiled. "Preparation for Northwestern. I'm writing a theoretical paper on quantum encryption vulnerabilities." "For fun?" Lorenzo repeated, amused. "Most 16-year-olds watch movies for fun. Most 16-year-olds aren't me." She saved her work and turned to face him. "Did you need something?" "Just checking in," Lorenzo said, settling into one of her expensive ergonomic lab chairs, the best money could buy. "How are you settling in?" "It's strange," Elena admitted. "Good strange, but strange. A month and a half ago, I was struggling to pay rent and worrying about keeping Danny fed. Now, I have a laboratory, a college acceptance, and a crime boss who asks about my homework. Life's full of surprises," Lorenzo said dryly. Elena laughed, a genuine, unforced laugh. She had been doing that more lately. The haunted look from those first days had faded, replaced by something lighter,